Casey Hendrickson from the Mid-States Construction Studio. Mid-States Construction, one of the nation's leading authorized builders of new core building systems. On News Talk 95.3, Michiana's News Channel, your breaking news and weather station.
Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's News Channel. Once again, I'm your host, Casey Hendrickson. Producer Tim screening your phone calls, taking your traffic updates. Phone number to join us, 574-2595-95.3. That is 2595-953. You can also send a text message to 45364. Please put MNC at the beginning of that message. Yesterday, I told you with regards to this whole unmasking and Susan Rice thing. I told you several things, but one of the things that I said was that after several days, there had been no major media denials of this, and Susan Rice herself hadn't denied anything. And I said, usually that means there's something to the story, and you disappear for a couple of days, and you get all of your allies together, and you decide what the talking points are going to be and how you are going to all of a sudden defend yourself. If there is an immediate and visceral denial that happens with a story that breaks, usually that means that there is a high likelihood that it is false, or that there are some serious inaccuracies with the initial claims at least. When a major story breaks and all of the parties involved go silent and disappear and refuse to talk to the press and don't do anything, and the media themselves are kind of paused going, what are we supposed to do? Waiting for their marching orders. Usually that means there's something to it. So yesterday, nobody had come out and denied the Susan Rice unmasking allegations. Now, I told you that we have two sets of anonymous sources here. You've got the anonymous sources that have been telling Nunez that this happened. Then you have separate anonymous sources that are telling reporters in D.C. and in New York that what Nunez is saying is true. This happened. Those sources are separate from his sources, and they say that they don't even know who his sources are, but they want to make sure that he doesn't screw it up by divulging how this information is obtained, because this stuff is still classified, the methodology behind surveillance here, eavesdropping, if you will. And they want to make sure that they clarified exactly what happened. So part of why these sources came forward to Adam Housley and others in the media was to make sure that methodology wasn't divulged to the enemy, so that the process that they gather this information is still protected, and to make sure that any allegations that Nunez makes are not frivolous. That's the whole reason behind all of these news sources that are going to the press. Now, I've always told you, and I told you repeatedly yesterday, when you have anonymous sources, you've got to take it with a grain of salt. But there are patterns in news stories that seem to indicate whether or not there's something there. Again, an immediate visceral reaction of a denial, or with denial, I should say, typically means, all right, there's something that's way off here with the initial claims because people are denying this automatically. And that's usually how it goes. If somebody accuses you of doing something you didn't do, your immediate reaction is a very emotional, I had nothing to do with this, what are you talking about? If somebody accuses you of doing something that you did do, but you don't want anybody to know, you go quiet for a little bit, right? You got to formulate your strategy. You got to figure out how you're going to twist it, how you're going to spin it, how you're going to protect yourself. This is the pattern that we have with the Susan Rice bit. Now, again, we already know that there was surveillance and eavesdropping of Trump and his people. We already know that. It is undeniable. This is fact. Although some in the media will not acknowledge it in spite of the fact that we have actual physical evidence of this. What has always been at issue was the word wiretap. Was Donald Trump, was Trump's building, were his devices, were his computers intentionally tapped, if you will, by the federal government? Or were there surveillance of foreign operatives where Trump's people got caught up in that surveillance? Now, here's what's so interesting about this story. Every media outlet out there that calls Trump a liar right now, and you will hear from Don Lemon in a minute, every media outlet out there that is calling Donald Trump a liar on this wiretapping bit, every single one of them has admitted that Trump officials have been, shall we say, eavesdropped on, although unintentionally, through normal surveillance processes of foreign nationals. So everybody who is saying that Trump is lying is simultaneously admitting that Trump is at least half right. Again, the question is, was he wiretapped in his building, or was the issue supposed to be that his people were actually eavesdropped on? However that happened, irrelevant. The media is saying nobody has wiretapped his specific device, his specific building, his specific whatever. But they're all admitting that his people and Trump himself were caught up in surveillance. They all admit it. So we know surveillance happened. Period. End of story. Now, did Trump say things that were not necessarily accurate when it comes to where those wiretaps were targeting? Perhaps. Most likely. But the fact remains, his people were eavesdropped on. They were wiretapped. They were surveilled. Period. And everybody acknowledges that. Everyone. Including the people calling him a liar right now. So does it really matter, or are we simply getting into a bickering, peeing contest over semantics here? It sure seems like we are. So then the question, now that we know that there was eavesdropping, is, was the eavesdropping legal? It appears that it is. Because, again, you can eavesdrop on, wiretap, surveil foreign operatives, foreign dignitaries, foreign politicians, foreign whatever, without needing a warrant. And you can use them to target Americans legally if you know the Americans are going to be contacting them. And again, a transitional team for the presidency is going to make contact with Russian ambassadors. It's going to happen. So you surveil the Russian ambassadors knowing that you're going to get contact with Trump officials who are part of the transitional team, and you know you're going to be able to get that information. Is it unethical? Yes. Is it illegal? No. Now comes the whole unmasking bit. Is unmasking of these individuals in these reports, and again, if an American is on a call with a foreign dignitary who's a target of surveillance, and there's no criminal act that happens, the American is supposed to remain anonymous. In the reports, the American is supposed to be American 1 or American 2 or what have you, some generic term. It is not supposed to be Mike Flynn. It is not supposed to be Donald Trump. Unless something illegal happened and it turns into a criminal probe. And at that point, it becomes evidence and they're a target of the investigation. Of course, they can be unmasked. There was no criminal case here. So unmasking of these individuals seems highly, highly dubious. Now, does unmasking happen throughout the normal process of intelligence gathering? Absolutely. If it's necessary to the case. So-and-so said this and this and this. Okay, well, is this a concern? Yes, it's a concern. All right, well, who are they talking to? An American. Let's find out who that was and see if there's any other leads. So then you get the unmasking report. The person who requests the unmasking gets that report. They're the only person that's supposed to get that report, and they can go through and they can track down any potential leads there. Scenario 2. Is there anything that happened in this that we should be concerned about? Nope, nothing illegal, nothing unusual. It's all routine business stuff. Okay, well, who are they talking to? Not really relevant. They didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, but I want to know anyway. Why? Well, because what if they're a part of the Trump transition team? And we want to just, know who they are for political purposes. Okay. Then you unmask that individual. Now, all of a sudden, Susan Rice is sitting there with a name of somebody in Trump's team or a Trump supporter or what have you, based on the reports that we have. It's not just people in his inner circle, but it's supporters as well. So you've got that information now. There wasn't a legal reason for you to unmask that individual. There wasn't any kind of reason whatsoever that you would need to unmask that individual to track down any leads or get context of a conversation or anything of that nature. So it seems to be pure political curiosity at this point. Now, what do you do with that information? Well, if you release that information to the public, you've committed a crime. Hence Mike Flynn. Face up to 5 years in prison for that. So if you release it to the public, you've now committed a crime. If you keep it secret, unethical, not criminal at this point. But if you do, as Farkas has repeatedly said on not one, not two, but 3 different occasions, folks. Now she's denying, but she said it on 3 different occasions. If you then take that information, you spread it throughout the government because you're afraid Trump's going to come in, according to Farkas, and bury all of that. So you spread it to as many people as possible so the information doesn't ever go away and can more easily be leaked to the press, can be more easily leaked to the public, which again is a crime. Then you have criminal intent. This is why this case is important. People are confusing and conflating individuals on purpose in order to go ahead and steer the narrative of this. And the narrative that they are trying to spin is that Susan Rice didn't do anything wrong. Of course, the next question has to be, if Susan Rice didn't do anything wrong, why did she deny ever doing this a few weeks ago? She could have been asked about this a few weeks ago and said, yeah, I suppose it's possible it came up, but there's a normal process where, we'll unmask somebody and look into it, but I'm unaware of anything criminal and it should have remained classified. She didn't say that. She goes, I've never heard of anything like this at all. It's the same old Obama administration line of, I didn't know anything about this until I read it in the paper, Phil. Which Obama and everybody in his administration has said from the beginning of his time in office, every time there's a major scandal. We didn't know anything about this till we read it in the paper. We had no idea all this criminal stuff was happening in our administration. What are you talking about? Today was the day that the media launched their war. This is the day that the talking points were solidified. Talking points were agreed upon. The talking points were distributed, and everybody started saying the exact same thing. Yesterday at broadcast, that had not happened yet. And I told you they were formulating their talking points. They were getting ready to launch the coordinated attack of what this means, which means there's something there. So I'll tell you what some of that stuff is today. We'll go over more of this. And, of course, if you want to give us a call, react all of it, 574-2595-953. That is 2595-953. We'll do all that next on News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.
KC Hendrickson, News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.
Your breaking news and weather station.
Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. So yesterday I warned you it was coming, the coordinated effort here. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And when people go silent and disappear for a couple of days with a breaking news story and the media doesn't really fully give it attention, one has to wonder if they are coordinating their talking points. And the fact of the matter is they are all saying the exact same things today, which means there's talking points that got circulated among the media and prominent individuals in the Democratic Party to go out to the media and say these things. So I want to go ahead and play for you the intro from Don Lemon.
It has been 1 month since the President of the United States falsely tweeted that former President Barack Obama wiretapped him. 1 month later, the White House and the President are still trying to make a lie true.
Not a lie.
And they're using the President's Twitter account, the White House press briefing podium, and right-wing media to do it. Today, it's a claim that President Obama's former National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, unmasked the names of Trump associates. We will talk about that in detail in just a moment on this very program. And last week, it was a debunked talking point that former Obama administration official Evelyn Farkas admitted spying on the Trump team.
Debunked.
She did no such thing. The week before that, it was Representative Devin Nunes' clumsy effort to give the president cover for wiretapping claims. The president said he was vindicated by Nunes. He was not.
Yes, he
was. The Washington Post today calls the latest claims about Susan Rice anatomy of a fake scandal ginned up by right-wing media and Trump.
Washington
Post,
so let us be
very clear about
news stories on this.
There is no evidence whatsoever that the Trump team surveilled or was spied on illegally. There is no evidence that backs up the president's original claim. And on this program tonight, we will not insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise, nor will we aid and abet the people who are trying to misinform you, the American people, by creating a diversion.
Diversion from what? What's the diversion from? That's the word that everybody's using today. Oh, Trump's causing a diversion. A diversion from what? The great economy? And by great economy, I mean greatly improving economy. Not great yet. What's the diversion from? There were so many lies in that intro. It was 1 minute and 20 seconds. There were so many lies in that intro from Don Lemon that I could write whole articles on it. They are demonstrably false, easily debunked themselves. But again, when you go out there and you have a confirmation bias, bully pulpit sort of a scenario like CNN has, you go out there and you just, oh, the people watching us. No, none of that's true. No, it's all fake. It's all lies. It's not. It's been vindicated. That's the whole reason I took that first 17 minutes of the program to explain to you the plausible deniability that people like Don Lemon are using out there. Now, I want to remind everybody what Susan Rice actually said back in April. Last month, 2 weeks ago. So this is Susan Rice. This is PBS's News Hour, okay? They do an intro, and then they go to Susan Rice. I just want to remind you what she said, and then I'll take phone calls.
We spoke earlier this evening with former Obama White House National Security Advisor Susan Rice, the author of that piece. It was her first interview since leaving the White House. I began by asking about the allegations leveled today by House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes that Trump transition officials, including the president, may have been swept up in surveillance of foreigners at the end of the Obama administration.
I know nothing about this. I was surprised to see reports from Chairman Nunes on that
read it in the paper
today. I mean, let's back up and recall where we have been. The President of the United States accused his predecessor, President Obama, of wiretapping Trump Tower during the campaign.
See how specific she is?
Nothing of the sort occurred, and we've heard that confirmed by the director of the FBI, who also...
But we know that he was surveilled. We know that for a fact. Again, Mike Flynn, case closed. So why is it a couple of weeks ago she goes out there and she goes, I know nothing about this. I was very surprised to hear about this. You realize she has admitted today that she did, in fact, unmask people in the Trump administration. She did admit it. She did do it. Here's a little snippet from some of that sound.
Jobs in the national security realm. That's the only reason.
Within that process and within the context of the Trump campaign, the Trump transition, did you seek the names of people involved in, to unmask the names of people involved in the Trump transition, the Trump campaign, people surrounding the president-elect?
Let me be clear.
In order to spy on them, in order to expose them?
Absolutely not for any political purposes to spy, expose anything.
But did you leak the name of Mike Flynn?
I leaked nothing to nobody.
Okay, so she admits that she's unmasked people, but not for political purposes. For those of you who are proficient in English, I leaked nothing to nobody means I leaked everything to everybody, or I leaked something to everybody is what it means, right? That's, Tim, am I right? I leaked nothing to nobody means I leaked something to everybody.
Double negatives.
Notice how specific she was with PBS NewsHour. He said that we wiretapped Trump Tower. We did no such thing. Okay, but you surveilled him and we know that. I leaked nothing to nobody. Okay, is she just terrible at grammar? This is a person who's Stanford educated. Is she terrible at grammar? Or was this her saying, giving herself plausible deniability, saying I leaked something to everybody? Which, again, Farkas has been out there saying for several weeks. Not just this one interview, but for several weeks she's been saying this. So there's an awful lot to this that you are being misdirected for. And here's what happens when a story like this starts unfolding. And this is where people tune out, okay? This is why I took some time, and I did this very slowly, and then I promise I'll take phone calls. When you have a big scandal like this, here's what you do when you're defending the scandal. You throw every noodle in the pot at the wall. And it becomes so confusing, so complicated, that the average person loses track of where it's going. There's a bunch of straw man fallacy in there, which misdirects you off to a dead end. It has nothing to do with the actual story. So all of the stuff that you have heard Don Lemon say, Susan Rice say, and others say, all of that is fluff. The core issue is, we know that Trump was surveilled. The question is, Was it unintentional, or was it targeted by targeting foreign dignitaries you knew Trump's people were going to contact because it's a normal transitional process? When you did surveil him, since we know for a fact that he was surveilled, the question is, was it intentional or unintentional? That's the question that we don't have. We know that they were surveilled. When they were surveilled, why were they requested to be unmasked? Now, there's a paper trail. When you request an American citizen to be unmasked, the NSA has a form that you fill out where you have to give a reason why you want them unmasked. The media is disinterested in the reasons that Susan Rice gave for unmasking those individuals. Now, if we can see what those are, and a lot of that might be classified, folks, I understand that, but this is going to have to be where Congress comes in and these intelligence committees. If they get a look at this form and they see the reasoning behind unmasking Trump officials that were caught up in surveillance, whether intentional or unintentional, it's irrelevant, really. Were those reasons legitimate? If those reasons were legitimate, what were they? If they were not legitimate, why was the request made? If there was no legitimate reason to unmask those individuals, then the request would have to have been politically motivated. If it was politically motivated, do we cross into the realm of unethical or actual criminal behavior? With those unmasked names, where did those names then get distributed to? As Farkas said, we were doing everything we could to spread it throughout the entire government. Remember? She said that not once, not twice, 3 times. Weeks apart. Were they distributed throughout the government in order to prevent the Trump administration from burying that information? And when they were leaked out and distributed throughout the government, was it with the intent to make sure it went public, which is a federal crime? The media is disinterested in even asking the question. That's the story. Susan Rice would go on in that PBS story to sit there and talk about, everybody, not PBS, but the MSNBC story. People are trying to say that unmasking is leaking. It's not the same thing. I don't know anybody who is saying that unmasking is leaking. I don't know anybody who is saying that. And I don't know anybody who's saying that unmasking on its own is illegal. The leaking is. I do know people asking the question, why was the unmasking happening? Was it a legitimate thing or was it politically motivated? If it was politically motivated, was it criminal or was it just unethical? That question is being asked. And you've got Mika Brzezinski and MSNBC and Don Lemon at It's Not News at CNN and Andrew Cuomo at CNN. All of these people are sitting out there, or Chris Cuomo, excuse me, not Andrew Cuomo, Chris Cuomo out there saying that, no, none of this matters. None of it matters. It's a distraction. No, it's the only distraction it is it's a distraction from your fake Russian narrative that you keep peddling, which after all of these weeks and all of these months, there still is not one shred of evidence. And yet all of these networks that claim there's no evidence that we have in the past 36 hours or so that this has happened, so we shouldn't even talk about it. After months of coverage, there is no evidence that Trump administration was tied to Russia in any way, shape, or form, and yet they peddle that narrative every single day on their networks, every single day. So clearly they don't care about a lack of evidence to peddle a story. The real question is, did Susan Rice do anything wrong? Did the Obama administration do anything wrong? And the only way to know that for sure is to call her to testify under oath before Congress. That's it. That's all we have. She also denied that there was any sort of a document or a spreadsheet on these names, which was reported yesterday that we told you about. We'll find out if she's lying about that, too. Keep in mind, this is the same one that peddled the YouTube video caused Benghazi and that Bo Bergdahl was captured on a battlefield by the enemy under fire, which we know is not true, and we knew at the time was not true. All right, promise, I got to take a quick news break, and then we will take phone calls. 574-2595-95.3. Got more coming up, 95.3 MNC.